I'm Dr. Christy Bielmeyer, and this is Intro to Environmental Engineering. We are studying the environmental impact from commuting from Alweif to BU, and my students have put together a great presentation.
The first thing we considered was the different routes to take to get from Alweif Station to the George Sherman Union. As you can see, there were 5 routes considered: biking, taking the bus, taking the T, walking, and commuting with a car or other such automotive transportation. Ultimately, walking takes the longest, about 80 minutes.
In order to judge the different modes of transportation, we decided upon a criterion. The main objectives of our criterion are price, time, cost, and essentially life cycle. The most important criterion we decided upon are those 4, and the least important is the cargo volume. We got these criterion results from research and discussing with each other, and then we ranked them based upon a survey that we sent out to the BU students population here at Boston University. As you can see here are the raw data rankings we found from our research. Biking and bike share actually have a lower carbon emission than walking. Part of this is due to the fact that when you walk, you are exercising more and breathing harder over a long period of time compared to biking, which is a shorter period of time. And another important note to notice is the safety rating. As you can see, public transit is actually higher than you would say like walking or biking. Here are some other rankings as shown. Not surprisingly, walking and biking are generally higher up on the rankings overall across the board. And something to notice is that through these rankings are essentially our ratings for them. The cargo volume, as shown here, is part of the lowest.
So delving into some of the statistics of motor scooters, they are significantly safer than motorcycles. Motor scooters record about 7 deaths per billion on average, as opposed to 212 deaths per billion on a motorcycle. They are also a little cheaper than motorcycles, about $3,000 less, and both motor scooters and motorcycles, given that they both travel 13,000 miles in 1 year, they will produce basically the same carbon dioxide emissions, which is 3,290 kilograms. And after we took all of our modes of transportation, compared them with each other, we found that motor scooters rank significantly higher than motorcycles.
On this slide, we compare the relative safeties of each of the various modes of transportation, and it's very obvious to see that motorcycles are much more dangerous than all of the other forms of transportation that we looked at in this experiment. One of the reasons that these are so dangerous is simply because there's very little crash protection if you're riding a motorcycle, and also other drivers will suffer from inattentional blindness, which is where they basically just don't even see somebody who's on a motorcycle because it's smaller than a car. And motorcycles are also much more susceptible to poor road conditions. This really applies to our project in the fact that motorcycles are pretty good choices for people who want to reduce their carbon footprint and seem on the surface as a good way to commute from Alweif to Boston University. But the fact that the safety is so much worse than the other methods of transportation really rules it out and reduces the appeal of having a motorcycle as your main form of transportation.
One of the modes of transportation we initially considered but then threw out was the helicopter. I individually thought that this would be the best option because not only is it quick, it's also safe. However, it did end up having the second largest carbon footprint, and it faces many regulatory hurdles in the Boston area. There currently is no public heliport, and it also has the largest consumer price.
To come up with our rating system, we sent a survey out to 87 BU students and asked them to rate the importance of different factors on how they choose modes of transportations. We had them rank it on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being least important and 5 being the most important, and used our results as a multiplier for our raw data.
So after combining our raw data with the relative weight of importance defined by the BU student survey, we came up with the fact that for students, walking is the best option if you're commuting from Alweif to BU. This is mostly because walking performs extremely well in certain categories where other modes of transportation don't perform nearly as well, mainly carbon footprint and overall operational and purchase cost. The main downside of walking is the fact that you spend around 80 minutes in transit. And another sort of interesting fact is just that walking is actually the most dangerous transportation option if we don't consider the motorcycle. After we figured out that walking was the best option, we decided to look at all of the other methods of transportation that we had considered to see just how they shape up relative to one another. And from this we determined that the best options for students are walking, biking, and using a bike share program, while the sort of second best option, which balances cost with carbon footprint, but not as well as the options that don't include a gasoline engine vehicle. We included public transportation as well as the motor scooter, simply because it has a low operation cost and purchase cost. The worst options, unsurprisingly, are gasoline cars and motorcycles, but it's also kind of interesting that the electric car performs badly, considering that a lot of people consider them to be a more economical option for transportation and reducing your carbon footprint.